Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Evan Scrimshaw. I say this week's edition. I recorded a solo podcast on Time of the Flat Circle Wednesday, I believe, telling Katie Telford and the telling Katie Telford to go fuck herself and the Liberal caucus to grow a fucking spine. Today I have a friend of the site, friend of the show, Ben Oates, on to making his podcast debut. I'm hoping that it will be a successful podcast debut and I can have him on again. But I have decided. Okay, I'm just gonna lay this out for people. I want 2025 to be a year where I use the limited or not so limited influence I have. You can take or leave how important you think I am, to elevate important and useful and interesting voices in the liberal movement and in the progressive movement and in the sort of cause of pragmatic progressivism that I, use my site to articulate. And I wanted to do a podcast after this Cabinet Shuffle, and Ben is a former member of the Newfoundland Young Liberal Board. He's a connected Newfoundland liberal. He is smart as he's whip smart as a tack. He has, a perspective I think that is interesting, given that he is in one of the few places where the liberal brand, not the federal liberal brand, but the liberal brand in general, is not in complete tatters. And he can record the podcast. I want to do it. This will probably be I don't know if it'll be the last show of the year. It'll definitely be the last show before Christmas. I might do like an year-end review if I have like an interesting guest or whatever. But this has been an extremely long prologue. Ben Oates, how you doing, buddy?
Not too bad, Evan Scrimshaw. How you doing?
I am doing well. I would be doing better if the entire Canadian government didn't decide to collapse this week. But it's been a week.
It's
got to do my Canadian explainer for dummies with an American buddy of mine whose podcast I have routinely gone on for American politics duty. So that's always fun. I will confess to you that I am already a little bit drunk and I'm about to get significantly more drunk over the course of this podcast. So, I guess the first thing is, I obviously have written, I don't even want to count how many columns I've written this week. The answer, I think, is 7.
I think you've pumped out one a day. Yeah.
No. So I did 2 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday. I did 2. I didn't do one on Wednesday, but I posted one Thursday morning, and I did the Nate column Thursday night, and then I did the shuffle column. I think it's 7 this week. That's too much content. Please stop having me have to write multiple columns in a day. It's unacceptable to me. Unfucking acceptable to do that. Plus, my second Monday column is actually just a live blog, and that was more work than I usually do. But I'm basically, if people would like my opinions on how this week has gone, Scrimshaw Unscripted.substack.com. Maybe get a paid subscription. Give the boys some money if you like my work. Pay to keep my, pay to destroy my liver. Let's make it a challenge. The fuck Scrimshaw's liver 2025 challenge.
Oh my days.
But my thoughts on this week are pretty well out there at this point. Yours are. Go with this shit show of a week wherever the fuck you want. We'll have the conversation.
Right. Well, thanks for having me on the show. First of all, that's a hell of an opener. Second of all, I mean, everybody in the country is currently going and looking at what's going on in Ottawa and kind of going, well, that's kind of crazy. And I think this is the first time that we've seen, I won't call them cracks because that makes it sound like we want something bad to happen. But it's the first time we've seen the Prime Minister and PMO react in any sort of significant way for the first time in their 9 years in government. Let me just put a huge disclaimer out there to your listenership. I'm a 20-something-year-old. I'm still in university. I will hopefully I'll be graduated in April. I'm for all intents and purposes, I'm just a guy. So
how old do you think I
am? You're 27.
Yeah, I turn 28 in a month. I think it's literally a month. Yeah, it's a month today. I was born 5 hours and 3 minutes into Bill Clinton's second term. But like this idea, respectfully, there is better political commentary being done on Twitter by like literally high schoolers than half of the Ottawa Press Gallery. Fuck this idea that you don't like. What the fuck are my credentials to be an important person? I worked on the Hill for like 6 months.
True. Yeah.
Fuck credentialism. Just make your points.
Well, this dives into a bigger question, I think, and it's an existential one for the Liberal Party that we need to consider. Well, what I think that we need to consider, and I think it would do us some good, right? And you touched on this in one of your columns, and I just kind of like to reiterate it, is that I think as a party, as a movement, as an ideal, we need to be more open to not getting, we're not going to ever please anybody, but we need to be more open to criticism. And I think this is something that, we've seen the Prime Minister not be very good at. I'll put it that way, in the sense that it kind of feels like every time something bad has happened, I call it passive crisis management, which is basically just we're going to ignore it and it's going to go away, which did work on a lot of files, to give them some credit, right? They weren't doing it out of nowhere. It worked with the SNC-Lavalin thing, kind of. It worked with the We Foundation stuff. It worked with Palace Intrigue 1.0. It's not working with Palace Intrigue 2 Electric Boogaloo, which is not a bad thing. I think there's a lot of buzz on the Hill, in the inner circle, in the upper echelons, in the top brass, that are kind of freaking out. But, I haven't known you long, Evan, but I think it's fair to say, and I know a lot of other Liberals and young Liberals especially, is that we don't make criticism from a point of trying to tear the government or anybody down, right? Our goal, our objective is actually to make it stronger, right? So that's my little soapbox speech right off the bat. Probably boring as sin. Everybody's
no, because so I went back and listened. I did when Doug Ford announced his stupid fucking we're gonna tunnel the 401 policy, like it feels like it was a year ago, but it was like 2 months ago or whatever. I did a Ontario focused podcast with Nathaniel Arfin, and I did a rant at the end about how if you genuinely believe Pierre Poilievre is the like authoritarian fascist that I keep being told by Mark Gerritsen and Jen O'Connell that he allegedly is, I don't think he is. I think he would be a bad PM for the reasons that like most conservative leaders in this country turn out to be pretty fucking bad. But like, if you genuinely believe the propaganda that you claim to believe, if you genuinely believe he is truly that deep of a threat, right, then you have like a moral obligation to get your head out of your ass. You have a moral obligation to save the Liberal Party, because if you believe Poilievre is as bad as everybody claims him to be, then you need to fight that with every tool in your toolbox. You need to fight it with every tool in the toolbox. And the problem is, I've articulated that in I don't know how many columns at this point. I did that rant with Arfin. And like, I'm right. I'm 1,000% right. I will go to my grave knowing that I am right about this, right? But the thing that gets me about this from every angle is you have so many people who have decided that me, Mr. Hated by a certain faction of Bonnie Crombie's people, certain faction, plenty of them I'm still on good terms with, but like, who lambastes her on a regular basis to the annoyance of all of my non-Ontarian readers for being too moderate, not insufficiently progressive, right? I'm then being called a conservative hack because I refuse to line up behind a prime minister who was polling in the low 20s. We have 3 post-Freeland resignation polls now. 19% in Abacus, 19% in Main Street, 19% in Ecos. Keno Maggie, Frank Graves, and David Coletto, 3 people who, if you like, 2 people who are like openly anti-Poilievre. Well, Frank is anti-Poilievre. Keto's a member of the Ontario Liberal Party, like openly admits to it. And Coletto, who, for all that people claim that Coletto is some like secret conservative, I've said this before, but do you think David Coletto, paid subscriber to my site, has given me free polling data 2 times in the last 3 years? It really feels like if Coletto was really trying to usher in fascism, you'd think he probably wouldn't help strengthen, give credibility to, and literally pay cash to my annoyingly shit lib ass. But that's not the point. 3 pollsters have the Liberals at 19%. It's pretty clear that because especially Ecos had I think a 5-point drop in the Liberal vote share. Because it was in the mid 20s before. Like, it's pretty clear that the Freeland resignation and the chaos this week, like, it's pretty clear that has sort of broken through. One, are you surprised to the extent that it's broken through? And 2, like, do you think there's any coming back for the Prime Minister?
On point 1, no, I'm not surprised, to be honest. And I'll preface me saying that by saying that, I personally believe, and I think that I know this to be true, that Canadians at their heart, no matter if you're Liberal, Tory, NDP, Green, I don't care, blue, purple, who gives a shit, right? Canadians at their core are an honest people, right? So to see that sort of like Jeffrey Howe style resignation from, for all intents and purposes, the Prime Minister's right hand, has been since the beginning, is going to have an impact, right? Because even people, I think a lot of people this week, and just talking to some buddies of mine and people just even in the grocery store, right? Like, people who are not hot on Canadians don't vote for people. That's just a fact, right? In the past 30 years, we've just voted against whoever is in. It's an anti-incumbency wave. It's a feature, not a bug, right? But there are a significant amount of people who are skittish about Poilievre, who are willing to give Trudeau the benefit, who were willing to give Trudeau the benefit of the doubt, that seeing this sort of change in tone, this completely brutal resignation letter from Chrystia Freeland, who, communications issues aside, I hold in high regard, right? I think she's intelligent, she's articulate, and she, I've read her book. She knows what's going on, right? So to see that kind of break from what we've seen from the government for the past 9 years, which is passive crisis management, did resonate, right? Canadians are honest people, and they know a bad thing when they see it. They know Poilievre is a human equivalent of dandruff. They know they now know that the Prime Minister is, on his way out, perhaps, right? 2, is there any coming back for Justin Trudeau? To me, and this is honest, I don't have any huge beef with the PM. My reasoning for coming on and being a bit vocal and saying we need to change is just the fact that I don't really care who's running the party. It could be the Pope, right? Like, we need a plan. There are 3 keystone things to any political party. I know people will disagree with me. I'm not a political science student. I'm just an engineering dude, right? Big nerd. There are 3 key elements. There is attack your...
The vast majority of political science students are some of the stupidest people you've ever met. Signed an ex-political science student.
No comment. There's 3 key elements that we see that work, right? That do work. Attack your opponent, defend your record if you're the incumbent, project a message, right? The attacks that were landing are now gone mute because the best attacker in the House, Sean Fraser, is gone. For his own reasons. God love him. I hope he's doing well. I hope he's having a wonderful Christmas. Good old East Coast boy. God love him.
I will just say, a lot of times politicians will invoke, family issues as a mechanism to resign for, reasons that have nothing to do with it.
Right.
I actually genuinely do believe them. I'm not explaining why. I know for a fact that there are legitimate family reasons.
No, exactly right. And I was honestly.
I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to the listeners because I have no problem telling you. I honestly might have already this week. It's been a long week, but like I know people tend to get very like family issues and like the vast majority of the time it is bullshit. Okay, with him it's actually not.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So reasons aside, again, I'll take it at face value, and I was sad to see Fraser go. I think he represents more of the direction that the party needed to go about 2 years ago. And the best time for them to change direction was 2 years ago. Second best time is now, right? Anyways, that's besides the point. So to have Fraser and Freeland go in the same week is bad. Is there any coming back from the Prime Minister? The only way that he gets back is attack, defend, project. The attacks are stalled. The defense, we have no legs to stand on. I don't see that. We do have legs to stand on. The Prime Minister, if you zoom out, and I think in 30 years' time, we'll look at what the current Liberal government has done. We won't remember all this palace. Maybe we will. It might be entertaining, right? But we won't remember the day-to-day. We'll remember the big things, right? We got through COVID without blowing up the economy. We got pharmacare. We got dental care. We managed the first Trump presidency. Second one, to be determined. It's not looking good.
Trudeau has a better record in historical hindsight, given what we know his history cares about.
Correct.
Then it's like I don't really want to argue Stephen Harper's legacy versus Trudeau's, but Harper will not play well to history because all his government was just kind of like managerial competence. And that tends to be lost to history. Like, look at Mulroney, right? Who is like similarly ambitious, did a lot of stuff. When he died, we pretended he was a great prime minister. Mulroney's shit, right? Like, wasted a decade on constitutional fights. We avoided key structural economic reforms because of the fact that so much of our intellectual capacity was going to reforming the Constitution. He nearly let Quebec secede. He came a tied vote in the Senate away from rebanning abortion in the country, right? Like, Mulroney was actually quite shit, but he has like three things that he can hang his hat on. The Montreal Protocol,
NAFTA,
obviously, or the US Canada FTA. And that's the stuff that gets remembered. Your accomplishments gets remembered. And childcare, pharmacare, the CCB, COVID, and dental, that is a legacy. Trudeau will look great in history. The problem is he's polling at 19%. But here's the other thing, and this is the point I keep making, and no liberals seem to understand it. If you are 27 years old, I'm not talking about me, but let's 27 years old, you were a teacher, right? You've been working you finally got a full-time position at a just normal suburban high school, right? You don't make enough money to be in the second tax bracket, right? Or you do, but like very minimally. You don't have kids yet. And because you're a teacher, you get public dental, public pharmaceutical drug coverage, and you get dental coverage. What has this government done for you?
Right.
Like, that's the problem. There's a group of people who have greatly benefited from this government. Nathaniel Arfin literally is like the encapsulation of it. Middle class guy, 2-parent family, has 2 young kids. One of them literally, was in the beneficial childcare age range. The other one's about to be in it. Like, we know what it is. And it's just like, but if you're 27 and don't have a kid, or you're 53 and your kid's at university, what has this government done for you?
Right. And that goes back, that's a good question, to be honest, right? And it's one I ask myself. I'm 22 years old. We're all graduating university. We're starting to set ourselves up. And people my age, the one thing that irks me about a lot of the pollsters, or not pollsters, politicos, but political commentators and politicians, is that they don't seem to understand, not to sound like a complete douche, but they don't seem to understand my generation, in the sense that what worked in 2015 through 2020 ain't going to work now. It's not working, right? We're in a post-COVID era. The world has gone insane, and our generation is in the midst of it, right? Inflation has gone through the nose. Let me preface this. A lot of these things are not the Prime Minister's fault, no matter what Poilievre's. It's like back in the early days of the Trudeau government, when you had everybody singing and dancing and saying, oh, Trudeau's causing the price of oil to go up. Trudeau has no less... Canada doesn't have any influence on the price of a barrel of oil. Anyways, that's a whole other discussion. I could get into that. I won't. I think the government has underestimated just how much their core demographic has changed, in the sense that people are feeling, and again, I don't want to speak on the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people are stressed. The vast majority of people are terrified. The vast majority of people don't particularly see the government coming to save them. And I'd say a good chunk of people don't really want to, right? I think this goes back to a comment you made to me once, Evans, like a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Prime Minister's got a good record he can hang his hat on, great. I'm sure I'll take advantage of these programs at some day, childcare, primary care, dental care, whatever, right? And I'd like to think that a vast majority of Canadians will know that even though the policy isn't meant for them, meant to benefit them, it's still a good thing, right?
But okay, no, I want to, because I think I know the point you're going to make, and I want to get there in like a couple minutes. I want to drill on this, right? For some reason, it is acceptable to bribe seniors with policies, lowering the retirement age, increasing GIS, increasing OAS, right? Like that is somehow perfectly fine for a progressive political party to do, to explicitly ask seniors to vote in their self-interest, right? Yeah. But for some reason, when it's 22-year-olds, so you would have been, I'm not trying to dox you, but you would have been in high school when the pandemic happened, right?
That's correct. That was in my last year.
Yeah. So you had to deal with the last year of high school and at least the first year, if not more, of your university life being COVID fucked, right? Correct. And when, like, respectfully, we know the impacts of COVID get, in terms of severity, get worse as you go up the age scale, right?
Correct.
So, the sort of like high school class of 2020 or the high school class of 2021, ended in a position where they had to sacrifice, and anybody who was at university in those years, right, had to sacrifice key components of what a high school and college life is supposed to be. Nights out at the bar, hanging out with friends, doing all this shit. Like, they did all that for everybody else, right? They did that to stop 65-year-olds dying of COVID. They did it to reduce the spread. They took the brunt of losing that communal experience, of losing that opportunity to have some fun, to blow off steam, to meet people and have the nights that you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And we know, and this is partially just me being, nostalgic for, being 19 or whatever, but like, I don't think I've ever told the story, but the way I got my Hill internship, which, it was an unpaid internship originally, and I was getting paid, there was a University of Ottawa Young Liberals bar night, and one of the guys who came was Wayne Long's, Hill legislative assistant or whatever, and him and I got on, and he and I had spoken before because we had done we'd been in the same model parliament party, and so he's like, hey, well, why don't you intern for Wayne? And so we did, and it worked. And funnily enough, that guy is now the current housing minister of New Brunswick. Shout out David Hickey, if you're the 0% chance you're listening to this podcast right now. Those kinds of, it is actually a material harm to people to lock them in their dorms and basically, force them to not be able to interact or not be able to get drunk at a bar. Because the thing is, as fun as it is just to be drunk or whatever, we ask the young to do it for the best of it. And what we've rewarded them with is rent that's doubled in 10 years, a pretty shitty economy. Like, let's not pretend an economy with unemployment roaring to 7% is particularly good. And for some reason, now that the young are saying, well, we see all of these targeted bribes to everybody else, right? We see these targeted bribes to young families, to people with kids, to seniors, right? To all of these other groups. It's not unreasonable that the young say, hey, if you're throwing all this money in here, there, and everywhere, where the fuck's mine? Where the fuck's my program? Where the fuck's my help? It's not unreasonable.
No, I agree. And I think I'm going to speak dangerously here, and I'm going to preface this by saying I think Jean Chrétien is one of our best prime ministers. But I distinctly remember in the 2021 election, just after COVID, that I really remember this. And I think it came from a good place. And I know what he was trying to get at. But when he came out and said something along the lines of, what are you complaining about? Canada's not broken. It's the best the country's ever been. The government has they're not doing it now. I think in recent months, they've kind of started to realize that, we're up shit creek without a paddle. That did a lot of damage, I think, to the Liberal brand, right? It's equivalent. It's like, it's their Ça ira moment, right? It's like Marie Antoinette just saying, I've let them eat cake, kind of. Not to that extent, of course. I'm not calling for people to get guillotined, but, that did a lot of damage. So I think, for a Liberal Party, for a prime minister, for anybody to pull ahead and win, the core paradigm shift has to be, things have changed. They're not going to revert back to the way they are. Pandora's box is open. How do we do that? The key paradigm shift. A rising tide lifts all ships, right? These sort of target measures would have made sense, and would make sense in a pre-COVID era, right? The economy was cooking, right? Canada was in a good spot. Everything was looking good, right? People felt good about the way things were going. So we had the money, we had the social capital, political capital, to be able to make these target programs work, right? And I don't care what this is branded as politically, but rising tide lifts all ships. We do have a productivity crisis in the country, right? We do have a GDP growth problem in this country. We do have I won't call it a high tax regime, but people need to feel like they're getting value for paying their tax money, right? And sometimes it can feel like they aren't, right? That needs to be the key paradigm shift. Is one, the party's core demographic has changed, /aged out, /gone on, whatever, right? Two, don't underestimate the amount of societal change that's happened since COVID. I think, not to plug the Newfoundland Labrador Liberals, but Andrew Fury, our premier back here, had an excellent point. It was a random scrum one day. I couldn't tell you what it was all about, but he said something along the lines of, we told people to lock down the house and not see anybody for 6 months because we thought they were going to die. That's going to have an impact on the way people live. And that's true, right? So I think the Liberal Party, the way I've kind of read their way of being post-COVID, is that they still kind of think it's the sunny ways days, right? And that's got to change. We got to go back to core center-left policies, things that, rising tides lift all ships. Make people's tax dollars work for everybody in a way that makes sense, right? We're not going to please them all. There's going to be opposition, obviously, but everybody needs to see a place in this government, in this party, and the actions of the past couple of weeks, months. I don't think, I'm not going to say it's been intentional, but I just think it's important to bring the front that we just need to be aware of how much things have changed.
So this is I think a great sort of like encapsulation of the crisis of the Liberal Party right now, right? Which is, there is like no creative or innovative thinking happening these days.
Correct.
Right? I wrote a column in a provincial context, in fairness, but like I'm aware of the fact that a lot of the Hill still reads my body crappy columns. Being like, the left needs to re-embrace fiscal discipline. Now, not fiscal discipline in the sense of cutting spending, But identifying waste, identifying programs that are no longer working, because if you can save 500 million, a billion, $2 billion, that is an extra $2 billion that you get to spend on good shit, right?
Correct.
That is $2 billion you get to spend on stupid GST holidays or productivity boosts or, capital allowance, fucking accelerations, or whatever your thing is, right? And this like weird refusal of the left to reclaim fiscal discipline and sort of like spending money wisely is like shambolic to me, because you can reframe the language of spending your tax dollars wisely, being prudent, wanting to make sure we squeeze the most out of every dollar. You can reclaim all of those concepts for progressive means, right? Which is to say that if we identify $1 billion in waste here or half a $500 million in waste there, that's extra money we can send to the provinces for healthcare, or we can spend more on national defense. And I think people will be more accepting of either higher borrowing costs, higher deficits, or higher taxes if people are genuinely willing to believe that their tax dollars are being spent efficiently, right?
Correct.
If you have no reason to think that they're spending the money that they already tax well or efficiently, then no shit you're going to be opposed to tax rises or to various measures. But the thing is, like, I wrote that as an idea, right? I put that out. I made the case for it. Clearly, nobody in the LPC is listening, right? I've written a dozen ideas for what this government can do, be it firing people, be it I wrote when Nate Erskine-Smith did his scrum about how Andrew Bevan has a 5-point plan he wants to present to caucus, which, as far as I'm aware, has still not been presented to caucus. New National Liberal Director Andrew Bevan.
You're kidding.
Like I wrote a 5-point plan that day, right? None of those ideas have even been remotely implemented.
Right.
I don't even remember what they were, but I am fully aware of the fact that they were not implemented. And it's like, I have asked, why the fuck is Stephen Guilbeault still the environment minister? Okay. I didn't get to it in today's column because I focused on Jolie. The last time Stephen Guilbeault spoke in English was his stupid, we're not building any more roads policy, which is not actually what the government policy is. But this is the problem with having an environment minister who can't speak English properly, is that a reasonable policy, aka we're not going to help the province fund the 413, the Ontario government fund the 413, right, turns into we won't fund new roads. Like, why the fuck is he still environment minister? You're from Newfoundland. You're an engineering student. Respectfully, a lot of engineering students in Newfoundland end up working in oil and gas.
Correct.
Can you please explain to me why the fuck Stephen Guilbeault is still environment minister when he cannot articulate any liberal policy? He literally cannot do a media scrum in English without putting his foot in his mouth, to the point where it needs to be cleaned up immediately by another minister or the PM.
Correct.
Why is he still the environment minister?
I'll also just touch on this, is that I think I don't want to come out and slam a cabinet minister and stuff like that, because I'm sure he has a reason for the way he acts the way he does. But to have somebody coming from a province that has benefited from the fruits of Confederation the most, and I think you can make a fair argument for that, where the oil and gas industry, or any industry, the oil and gas industry does not play any part in Quebec. To have somebody come to a province that was at the time on the ropes, right, fiscally, and say, we don't know if we can approve your project, without an alternative to what the Beta Noir would have been, that's not going to win you any votes, right? And this is a different conversation I could get into about environmental policy, period. But I think at some points in its history, the government has been punitive against significant parts of of Canadian society, right? I'm not saying it was unwarranted. I'm not saying it's unjustified. I'm just saying that to come from it's not the government's place to do that, right? In the sense that, we don't need to slam an entire industry, and we don't need to slam. Yeah. Anyways, I could yam on. I'm not going to get stuck in a rabbit hole, but just go back to your main point there. And my main point too. There's three key aspects: attack, defend, and project. The government is not projecting anything at the moment, right? It's unintentionally projecting chaos, but it's not projecting anything that's in it for Canadians, as far as I know, right? And just saying to Canadians, trust us, we're working for you, is not working. I don't think it's treason to say that, right? It's
and
not
also, respectfully working. Yeah, they're nominally attacking Polyev, but like, I'm sorry, a $50,000 social media ad buy is not solving your problem when Pierre Polyev is spending millions on broadcasting cable television. And like, I made this point on the podcast with David Coletto, but like, you can literally trace when Polyev started making his ad buys with his uptick in approvals, because he was like, people who approved to Polyev in Abacus tracking, it was low 30s. He starts his ad buys, it jumps from like 31 to like 35 to 37 to 39, and it has mostly stuck in that 39 band, like in that sort of like high 30s band since. And like, frankly, I mean this genuinely, sincerely. Like, if the Liberals are not going to sell their message on TV, what the fuck are they doing? And also, they're not even spending any government money, which is theoretically admirable, right? But like, every time I listen to a podcast, like, I will just be listening to like some like random ringer podcast. Like, I'm sorry, I'm like a big Bill Simmons guy, bite me. I listen to like The Big Picture or whatever. And I'll be listening, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll get like a Government of Ontario ad paid for by the taxpayers about how like actually Doug Ford is like the greatest person ever. Why the fuck are the Liberals not doing that?
Counterpoint to a sense. What would they even say?
So, okay, here's the great example, right? I don't remember when this was. It was sometime this year, but I tweeted like, how many people have actually, like, has anybody actually gotten like dental care or free, like either their dental care covered or like free drugs from Dental or Farmer, right?
Yep.
And within like 20 minutes, Justin Trudeau had tweeted that, like, I think the number at the time was 200,000. I think the number is now significantly higher than that. Seniors had gotten dental care covered by the new dental plan, which, okay, great, fantastic, cool. It was very funny. A PMO staffer liked to tweet about how, people were responding to me, right? Whatever. Very clearly, the Trudeau tweet was in response to me being like, has literally anybody gotten this? Okay.
Right.
Why the fuck are we not spending government money advertising about this fact? Because the thing is, I don't know if we're at 1 million seniors have gotten dental care, but I think we're pretty damn close or coming to it. But it's like, at some point, if the game is spending government money to advertise government policies, there are a lot of things that are quote unquote announceable, right? Like, oh, we've hit 500,000 seniors that have done this, or we've hit 750,000 seniors who've gotten dental care from this program or whatever. And it's like, well, if you're not going to spend any party money, partially because you aren't spending any money, this is my big rant, right? Which is, oh, we don't have any money. Well, part of the reason that you don't have money is because you're polling at 22%. If you spent some goddamn money, you would maybe be polling at 27 and you would have a better fundraising apparatus, but whatever. That logic is lost to the PMO these days. I'm going to ask you this question. This is how we're going to transition this. I wrote in June that Justin Trudeau needed to resign after the Toronto St. Paul's by-election loss. If Justin Trudeau hadn't resigned, But if I had been appointed to Katie Telford's job on June 25th, the day that we lost the St. Paul's by-election, would the Liberal Party be in a better or worse position than it currently is?
It's a big hypothetical, but I think the general paradigm of the way you're going about things is logical, right? We would be. I think again, what the hell do we know? We're 20 somethings, but like, what's working right now is not working. Sorry, what's working? What's happening right now is not working. I think it could be you. It could be like anybody. Change is not a bad thing, right? One. Two, just to loop back a tiny little bit here, right? All of these policies are great. They're wins. You can hang your hat on them, right? But just to go back to the project thing, what's the government going to say? What's the sell going forward, right? Like, I know why I'm voting for the Liberals. I'm sure you do know why you're voting for them too, right? But we're not the target demographic they need to hit, right? It's the general public, and the general public has transitioned, in my opinion, and I think this is can be backed up by data if you look at the polling, right? Has transitioned from, apathetic, they don't really care, to being genuinely kind of annoyed with the Prime Minister, right? And that's not me saying there's anything wrong with his character. It's just the nature of Canadian politics, right? It's cyclical. There's an anti-incumbency thing, right? So.
But also, to be clear, the reason I'm going to vote for the Liberals in 2025, which, by the way, I found out that I have been redistricted into Pierre Poilievre's riding, which means I am actually going to end up voting for Bruce Fanjoy, which is one of the great joys in life. Also, I have gotten drunk at exactly one party with Bruce Fanjoy's kids, so that's fun for me. But the thing for me is, like, I am voting Liberal explicitly not because they have done anything for me, but because I know a lot of people who are like 3 to 7 years older than me who have kids, right?
Correct.
That's why I'm voting for them, because I am like dealing with an unfortunately large number of people who have kids between the ages of 1 and 5. So therefore, the child benefit and the childcare deals are like big deals to these people. Yep. But that's why I'm voting Liberal. They have done fuck all for me. Yeah, and I am voting for other people's interests. But it's completely unreasonable to expect people to vote for other people's interests.
It is, and that's fair. And I don't think we shouldn't expect that people are going to do that, and it will be an unwise assumption for any political party to do that. That's why the NDP keep falling flat on their faces for a multitude of reasons. One of the things is that they believe that everybody is as righteous as them. Righteous is in air quotes. Oh my God, let me tell you. But just to think about that, right? We don't need a government. We shouldn't have a government that tries to please everybody, right? We need a government that, in my opinion, we need a Liberal Party that comes in and says, all right, here are our, let's say, 4 key pillars that we're going to really double down on, right? We're going to, with the current deficit that we have, let's say, just cap it like Freeland was trying to do it, right? Because I don't think Freeland kind of gets painted as like a center, like right, like super small L Liberal. Yes, but she wouldn't have been Trudeau's second in command if she didn't have a little bit of, progressive in her, right? So focus on 4 key elements. Bolster the healthcare system. There's problems there. Some of it's funding, some of it's strategy, whatever, right? Work with the provinces, boom. Healthcare. 2, national defense. And this is spicy topic coming from the Liberal Party. It's being neglected. There's no risk, personal risk to me saying so. It's been neglected. It's been neglected since Canada was a thing, right? We've always had a big brother or a big brother to lean on, right? First, it was the British Empire, and then it was the United States. Both of these are gone, right? We are on our own for all intents and purposes. And if we're not on our own, we need to assume so, because that's the safest bet. So healthcare, defense, national infrastructure, I think, is important. Is going to be a bigger one going forward, because national infrastructure, I think, encompasses a lot of the things that people are worried about, right? Housing, climate change, seniors and social development, intergovernmental affairs, you name it, right? National infrastructure. The rail system needs an overhaul, and we got to invest in big, nation building, quote unquote, projects and stuff like that. And number 4, last but certainly not least, and this is domestic, and maybe this is protectionist of me, but economic development, which kind of sounds crazy, might be an unexpected twist, but there's something to be said for. I think the government's done a decent job of this, actually, to be honest, right? In terms of innovation spaces, the Ocean Supercluster and, stuff like that. But if we had a government come in and say, we're going to focus on these 4 things, we're going to cut, kill, and steal from everything else to get these things to work, Canadians would go for it, right? Because the average Canadian is not going to interact with, 90% of the grants and programs and things that any government does, right? But everybody notices it when you go to the doctor and there's, lines wrapped around the thing. Everybody notices when the roads are buns. Everybody notices when it takes 3 hours to get from Montreal to Ottawa, even though the train ride, should nominally take an hour and a half, right? Everybody notices when, the United States, as they're doing right now, decides that for some reason they don't like us, and NATO starts yelling at us. And everybody notices when the economy's in the tank and they can't find a freaking job, right? So this is
but here's the thing. That would require a PMO that is willing to listen to anybody who says anything negative about them ever in the slightest. Because the thing, I agree with all of that, right? I agree that if the Liberal Party were to, quote unquote, get back to basics, there is absolutely a lane, a message, a viable path forward for a sort of like stripped down. And I don't even mean that in like we move to the center way, because I think in a lot of what you just said, there's definitely a lot of truth, but like you can position high-speed rail to just take like a high-speed rail on the Windsor, Quebec City corridor, right? Yep. Which is like a lefty position, a lefty priority, a lefty wish list item, right? But you can position that in that messaging, right? But I think there is this sort of like sense of like, frankly, the PMO has iced anybody who has ever said anything mean about them ever in their lives. Katie Telford, used to read my site and follow me on Twitter and has just completely undone both of those things because I dared suggest that the Liberals were not, fucking perfect. And I think the thing that gets me, right, is that there is like a very clearly an agenda that can save the Liberal Party, because there is a lot of, because the issues that plague the Liberal Party are not particularly systemic, right? The whole point of the Liberal Party is that it is anti-ideological in the sense that, like, the NDP will never be the party that it should be to win office, right? Like, we saw what the NDP did when Tom Mulcair offered, a vaguely centrist alternative, which is to say that they lost their minds and elected Jagmeet and decided that he is like a perfectly acceptable option, which he's not. But like the whole point of the Liberal Party is that it is both the party of Lester B. Pearson's sort of like nation building, hugely expansive, essentially social democratic policy options, but it was also the party of Chrétien's, budget repair of the 90s.
Exactly.
But the problem is that the Liberal Party is run by cultists, right? We get ourselves into cults. We get ourselves into a position where the fucking chief of staff is screening calls so that the PM only gets the calls of people who want him to stay in office. And at that point, that is the point at which I want to kill myself. And I want to like suddenly just give up on life in its entirety. And I don't know what to do about that, because the thing is, the reality is, the Liberal Party is currently constituted is broken in significant ways. And I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know how to solve it, and I don't know how to save the party if it is truly, genuinely susceptible to being overrun by people like Katie Telford, who have the intellectual capacity of a watermelon.
Well, I won't go that far. Like, I don't know Katie Telford.
I don't either, but also I have seen the last 5 years of this government, and look, I'm going to be real. the fact that the PM thought it would be politically acceptable to try and sole source a contract to a company, to a charity that had given his mother 6 figures of reimbursements and payments for speeches.
Yeah.
Like what? Like how the fuck did nobody in the PMO go, yeah, that's probably a bad idea, guys?
So again, I'm not here to speculate, right? Like to be perfectly honest, I don't know enough about these people. I've seen what's gone on, and
you're also nicer than me.
You know, there's something to be said. You know, the PM has been in power 9 years. They've for all their faults, you know, maybe there is you know, I don't know. I'm trying to be charitable here. My main goal right now going forward, and I think it's a logical goal to have, is just to keep the Liberal government from turning into the Weimar Republic after we lose, right? We need to keep our shirts on. We need to keep a rallying point. We need to, you know, the Liberal Party, like you said, is fluid. It can be the party of Lester B. Pearson, but it can also be the party of Jean Chrétien. It can be the party of Justin Trudeau. It could be the party of Paul Martin. We have that flexibility, right? And that's a good thing. We just need to figure out what wagon we're going to hitch ourselves to in upcoming things, right? Because there's going to be a vacuum left when we lose, right? That's not me being defeatist. It's just I think it's worth being realistic here, right? A post Justin Trudeau era is coming, if not imminent, right? We need to figure out what wagons we're going to hitch ourselves to in the post-Justin Trudeau era and try to come to some sort of understanding of where things went wrong, when we disconnected with Canadians, and what people want going forward, right? And I think that this is not me stumping for the opposition right now. I think, like I said, Pierre Poilievre is the human equivalent of dandruff, right? I'd rather have bowel cancer than be Pierre Poilievre, right? But so all he has offered is 2 things. 1, he's pointed out issues, and 2, he's been an alternative, right? His legislative record is abominable, right? He was a junior Harper minister who accomplished next to nothing and just sat there with his middle part in Parliament going, right? That's all this guy is, right? And he's writing.
Doesn't that make the Liberal Party failure significantly worse?
Correct.
They're losing to somebody who, like, I used to go to the House of Commons as a high school student in Ottawa because I just like literally needed to not be in class every day because I was like depressed and suicidal about my homosexuality. Right. But like, I remember reading, you know, Paul Wells and Andrew Coyne and all of these people. I remember reading the columns in 2012 and 13 and 14, right? I remember when he was appointed minister of the department formerly known as Human Resources and Skills Development Canada or whatever, right? HRSDC. Like, I remember when he got that job because Baird resigned and, you know, various shuffles happened. Everyone was like, sorry, you're giving this motherfucker a job? Like, what the fuck are you doing? And, you know, like, it's one of these things where Poilievre used to be a joke, right? You're losing to a guy, and frankly, even go back to like 2023. Do you remember the 2023 by-elections when like Ben Carr won with a big increase in his vote, and David Hildeby, I believe is his name. I want to say Dennis Hildeby, but that is the Leafs goaltender, or Marlies. Yeah. But like Hildeby got a big swing at Oxford, and Anna Gainey came into Parliament, right? Like that night, I wrote a column calling out Jenny Byrne, and this strategy is completely incompetent. A month later, the polls collapsed, and we, you know, ended up on the march here. But I still maintain Pierre Poilievre is not good at politics. It's just that Trudeau and the Liberals are fucking terrible at politics.
Correct.
So, isn't it more pathetic that you're losing to somebody who isn't even good at this?
Exactly. Like, and obviously we're biased. We're Liberals, but even just talking to average, like, I would honestly, not to use the whole walk in the snow metaphor, I would encourage and invite, in fact, any member of the PMO or the senior upper echelons of the Liberal Party. Just go have a beer in a dive bar. Don't tell anybody who you are because they probably won't know, right? Go have a beer in a dive bar, or go out and go have a cup of coffee, or go for a walk, or just go talk to somebody who's out in the boonies, right? And you'll realize that people don't care about, one, politicians, but they really don't care about Poilievre, right? Canadians don't vote, for politicians. And they're not voting for Poilievre. So there's no huge need for the Liberal Party to swing right or anything like that, right? They're just voting against us, right? And that's a key thing that we got to realize. Why? When did it start happening? Why did it start happening? What do we do to have to fix it? And most importantly, I think the number one takeaway is we need to not become the Weimar Republic, and we need to figure out what's our selling point to Canadians, right? What's in it for them? And this is going to be a pretty big discussion, but we need to make sure that we don't implode in the aftermath, right? And just
okay, so I want to pick up on that point, which is like we need to save the party, because we do.
Yeah.
So my position has been, since we lost the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, obviously Cloverdale, Langley City, the 53% swing against us, backs this up. That is the third biggest drop in government vote share at a by-election since 1993. And it's even more impressive given that like the Liberal vote share in 2021 wasn't particularly impressive. Like we literally didn't even crack 33% of the national vote at that election.
Right.
My position has basically been that even though there is not a particularly attractive leadership option, I don't see any of the leadership options doing worse than the status quo. And
no.
And most of the other options, I'm not positive Chrystia Freeland has significant upside, because I think she might be too closely tied to Trudeau. But like a Francois Philippe Champagne, honestly, I don't think Carney's a great option. I still think he's better than Trudeau, just because he hasn't been here for the last 9 years. But like, do you agree with me at this that at this point, like the theoretical upside of basically everybody else is worth more than the like certain failure of Trudeau?
Short answer, yes. In the sense that, if I'm interpreting your question right, in the sense that I think there's an assumption, and I think this assumption is being fortified by the idea that, we don't want to have a 1993 situation and, oh, look what they did down in the States and still didn't work and all this stuff, right? We're not the United States. It's not 1993. And I think that perhaps the upper echelons are underestimating just how peeved people are, right? They're not peeved with individual MPs. They're not necessarily even peeved with the Liberal brand itself, right? Yeah, you're going to get the odd people who sticks a weird, has that F Trudeau flag and stuff like that, right? But like I said, go talk to people and figure out what their vibe is, and you've come to realize that they don't love Poilievre, but they're just really, 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 really annoyed with the way things are going right now. And I personally,
how many people do you know that are like, oh yeah, Fury's great, but like that fucking piece of shit Justin Trudeau? How many people do you know who are like that?
So many, and it's an apple orange comparison. Me personally, I got into Liberal politics provincially first, right? And Fury, more on that later, but that's the vibe, right? Everyone's like, Fury loves that Fury. I know he's a good fella. He did me near, sir. He put me new hip in. I shit you not, Evan. This is a conversation I had one time. He's like, loves Fury. He put me hip in because he was an orthopedic surgeon in his past life. But that's effing Trudeau. That's the vibe, right? And why are they saying effing Trudeau? I don't know. I'm not qualified to say, right? Is it an anti-incumbency thing? Is it they're sick of him, or is he annoying them? I don't know. But it doesn't seem to be a downside. There doesn't seem to be a significant downside to just trying not even a Hail Mary. Just try something new. He could resign and step aside and take a vacation, because God knows he needs it. It hasn't been an easy stretch for him, I wouldn't say, right? And he could, in 5-10 years, enjoy the fruits of his labor, and just people will be saying, and I'll be quoted on this: Trudeau will go down as a good prime minister. Our best, maybe not, but a good prime minister. Once all of this anti-Trudeau mania goes away, right? It's just a fair thing. People are annoyed with us. We got to figure out why, and we got to start doing that, right? People don't, like I said, we need to give them something to vote for, something to believe in, and we're not.
So I was extremely critical of Nate Erskine-Smith's decision early this week. Jesus fucking Christ. I honestly, it feels like the initial report that Nate had agreed to be the housing minister came out like legitimately 6 weeks ago. It came out on Sunday. We're recording this Friday night. I was extremely critical of that decision a week ago. I have like mellowed on it significantly after speaking to people who understand Nate's motives. Do you let's cards on the table this for a second, right? Like, do we think that anything that the new cabinet is going to do is going to matter? Because Tyler Meredith, who was a former advisor to the PM and to Chrysler Freeland, kept making this point in the spring, which was the individual measures of the budget pulled pretty well, but the government's polling actually went backwards after a budget. Then again, the individual measures pulled well. Like, do we think there's anything that can be done short of a leadership change, or do we think that we're basically just kicking the can down the road? I think by pretending that Nate Erskine-Smith can fucking rally it. Like, do we think there's anything other than changing the leader that can solve this?
My personal opinion is no. I think there's an entire brand, an entire rank, an entire generation of up-and-coming liberals, young, old, whatever, who can't be heard, be out in front, have their ideas heard about until the current status quo steps aside, right? And I think it would be not only to the next generation's benefit, but also to theirs, right? It seems to me, and I can't make sense of it, and I don't think this is something we're going to be able to quantify, right? People just seem tired of the prime minister, and they're not
listening to this PM,
they're not listening,
right? Like this prime minister could say that the sky is blue, and 70% of the country would say, actually, no, it's beige.
Or they go outside and check to make sure, right? Like, so that's the thing that we're in right now. And I'm not saying that I don't know if it's his fault. I'm not qualified to say. I don't have any hard data to say whatever, right? But people are sick of him. And there will be a post-Justin Trudeau Liberal Party. There has to be, right? And that's not me trying to minimize all the good work that he has done, right? He did bring the party from third place to a majority. That's not an easy feat. He has won 3 elections. Those aren't easy feats, right? But there comes...
Yeah, and as somebody who voted for him in 2015, I would very much like him to get the fuck out so that I can remain, happy with him.
There are good people...
As opposed to being pissed at him for staying too fucking long.
There are good people in the cabinet. There are good people in the party, and we don't know who the future holds, right? We really don't, right? But it just, and I'm not saying this with any sort of vengeance for the prime minister. I know you're angry about it, but honestly, I if on the odd chance that somebody hears this and passes the message along, the prime minister, Justin Trudeau, backing out right now would not be a show of weakness. It would not be a death blow to the party. It would not be us rinsing our hands of him. It's just about time that we start thinking about what the party needs to look like going forward. And I think that there's a growing movement inside the party that knows this. It started here in Newfoundland, actually, with Ken McDonald, but it started to grow. The palace intrigue is not going away. And the longer this drags on, the worse it's going to get for not only the party, but the Prime Minister, and most importantly, the country. We are facing a pretty scary thing down south, right? And we need a Team Canada effort. And I'm comforted in the knowledge that we do have a group of premiers right now who, despite their faults, seem to be pretty united. You got Danielle Smith kind of doing her own thing, but I'll never make sense of her. One day she's like completely reasonable, the next day she's like the devil. It doesn't make any sense. But we have a group of premiers.
Sorry. Before you go on, I would just like to make clear. Yes, Doug Ford just like randomly deciding to walk through Queen's Park during Colin DeMello's like global news stand-up was not an accident. And everybody who pretends that like, oh, Doug Ford just like happened to be walking by to deliver the threat that like, yeah, if you impose tariffs, we're gonna do what we do. Like, no, that was very obviously Ford working with the Prime Minister to deliver a message while the PM keeps plausible deniability. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Who cares? For the most part, Scott Moe and Danielle Smith can fuck off, but like for the most part, the premiers are doing what they should be doing. And I am grateful to them for doing it. But like,
and like Danielle, I have feelings on Danielle Smith. You know, I think everybody does, but she's got a province which is mostly energy workers, and they would be the hardest hit by not only the tariffs, but if they decided to shut off the pipelines, right? I get it, right? She has to do her thing, whatever. So I'm comforted in the knowledge that we have a provincial front that seems pretty united on it. I'm not worried. At the end of the day, the federal government is the chair, but like, you know, we'll be okay. What really concerns me is that every day that the palace intrigue continues, it gets worse for the country, right? And we're rightfully so being beat to death by everybody about it, right? And I know being a Liberal supporter is a lot like being a Habs fan, right? You know they've got the talent. You know they've got the stuff in the woodworks. You know they've got the past glories. But without fail, they somehow manage to screw the pooch every single time, right? I love my Habs. I love my Liberals. All I want to see them do is succeed. But for the time being, all I can do is, you know, just come on places like this, try to open discussion, and just try to let's not turn into the, you know, let's chart a path forward. Anyway.
I think the thing that kills me about this party is that it is so prone to like cultish behavior, right? Like, because the thing is, let's just be honest, right? I support Anita Anand as the next leader. I'm not like gonna like openly shill for her in the sense that like, you know, like I'm not like particularly willing to like stake my entire reputation on the idea that like Anita Anand is like the second coming of Jesus Christ. But like, I know for a fact that part of the reason that Trudeau has managed to stay this long is that nobody is particularly convinced by any of the alternatives. That is like a singular fact that I'm willing to say as a fact in public. But I will say, I think, honestly, I like the problem is that we are in a place right now where the alternative is so bad. The only thing that we can like really fathom is that basically every alternative would be better, right? Like, I don't. What do you make of the of like a theoretical Carney leadership? Because I am on the record saying that I think that like running like a globalist who left Canada for like a decade is probably not the best idea. But yet I also think Carney would be significantly better than Trudeau. So like, but I don't know. What do you make of the theoretical Carney candidacy?
To be honest, Devin, I'm agnostic and I'm indifferent on any leader until they start running an actual campaign, because I want to see how each of them run it, right? And maybe Mark Carney would be a good candidate. Maybe he would run the kind of agenda that we need. I don't know. My gut instinct is that appointing or anointing Mark Carney as Liberal leader would be a sign to me that they haven't addressed the key paradigm shift that the country is in a different place than it was pre-COVID. And I'm not blaming everything on COVID, because obviously you can't, but the country has changed, right? It's not 2015 anymore. It's not the 2010s anymore. It's the 20s. And the 20s are proven to be mean and rough and difficult. And Mark Carney, to his credit, yes, he has a very accomplished career as a central banker and stuff like that, right? But I don't know what policies he'd be able to bring that would be able to right the ship. I've read his book, Values, right? Yes, they all sound like great ideas, but can you put that into a package that makes sense, that appeals, that's actually going to work? I don't know. So to be honest, I'm indifferent on all the leaders. To be honest, I'll keep my cards close to my chest on that. But we've got to define what kind of change we want to see. In terms of is anything better than the current prime minister? I think yes. I don't think we need a star candidate. We don't need someone with star power to replace him. We don't, right? Give you a little bit of Newfoundland and Labrador history. Our best premier, in my humble opinion, depends who you talk to, our best premier was in the 1990s. Well, besides Andrew Fury, hi if you're watching. Our best premier was a guy named Clyde Wells in the 1990s. He was a lawyer. He was soft-spoken. He was very intelligent. He didn't have the star power of anybody else, but he was a good negotiator. He was smart. He was level-headed. He knew when to listen, when to talk, and he stepped in a time. It was shortly after the Brian Peckford government, and Peckford was a loudmouth baboon, but we don't need a star to take over the party. I think Canadians would actually benefit or would be drawn to someone who is a little bit under the radar, because Canadians aren't extravagant people, right?
So you're telling me that Danny Williams wasn't the goat of Newfoundland politics, like everyone in mainland Canada believes he was?
So Danny Williams has an interesting history, and I won't mark him as chief just because him taking on Harper, hilarious. Love that. That was great. But it was marred by the Lower Churchill deal, to be honest. That's a whole different discussion. But
the fact that he couldn't get that done is
no. So the issue is he got it done, but it was very poorly managed from a government level. And there was a bunch of things with the Public Utilities Board and a bunch of scheming with this, that, and the other.
He couldn't get it efficiently done, is what I
mean. He signed the deal and walked away, and then now the province is in $13 billion of debt, thanks to So while I respect and give credit for Danny being the first premier to have a sense of swagger and pride about Newfoundland and Labrador, he does get knocked down a few pegs because he sentenced us to debt.
God, a liberal who cares about debt. God, you're a rare beast these days.
I'm a Newfoundlander, Evan. We had to be worried about
it. So I have gone on a bit of a warpath about Katie Telford. Obviously, the Globe reported that she is screening the Prime Minister's calls and only letting calls that are pro Trudeau through to him, and kiboshing the anti-Trudeau calls. Am I being unreasonable to say that Katie Telford is like committing treason to Canada?
Just a heads up that I do have to wrap up in about 5 minutes. So if we could wrap up soon, that'd be
this is already being intended as my last question. So
okay, cool. I won't go so far as to say she's a traitor to Canada. I think she's been the memory foam has turned into, that's a weird metaphor. Never mind. I think I won't call her a traitor to Canada. I don't know why she's trying to keep the Prime Minister in. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she actually does really believe it. And say that.
No. Let's be clear. The reason that she is trying to keep Trudeau in office is that her influence goes away, because she is never getting hired by any other member of this party. Because again, the only reason she is currently holding her job is that she was in Justin Trudeau's wedding.
Right, and again, that's not my call to make. I
am perfectly fine taking all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune for being willing to admit this in public.
Right. I don't think anybody in the Canadian government is a traitor. Wrong? Yes. I think it's fair to say that Katie Telford is wrong. Maybe the motives will never be understood, but in terms of her being the number one blocker, it logically would make sense that it is her. It could be the prime minister. It could be someone else in the cabinet. It could be the Illuminati. Who the hell knows, right? What really matters is that this is an issue. It won't go away. We need to figure it out as a party, as a people. And, the way to do that is we need to sit down, have a conversation, and figure it out. And I think conversations like this are the first part. I think I maybe you wouldn't, but I'd love to pick Katie Telford's brain and figure out what's going on. I'd love for there to be a plan. I'd love for just, to hear what the idea is. But
there's a reason I've written as many columns. I wrote a fucking column titled "The Speech Justin Trudeau Should Give." I have tried to be productive, but the fucking party will not meet us halfway.
Right. And this isn't, if they do, if they don't, their day is coming, right? Whether it's by their own hand or by the electorates, it's a coming, right? So my focus is not on that right now, to be honest, Evan. It's just trying to figure out what this party needs to look like after, because there is a post Justin Trudeau era, and I'd like it to not be us as the third party.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the polls right now were replicated at an election, we would be the third party.
Yep.
Which is why I would like to save the Liberal Party from that fate.
Yep.
Obviously, I was born to two Montrealers. I have a great relationship to the city of Montreal. My grandfather worked in the Sun Life building. I still refer to the street one block south of St. Catherine as Dorchester. I have a whole relationship with the city of Montreal. But, to me, it's we need the country to come on board, and we need Canada to get here, and it doesn't really matter. None of the sort of questions of deserve matter anymore.
Yep.
We are where we are, and we need to win. And I frankly just do not want the Bloc to win 55 seats, which is what some of these polls are suggesting. But Ben Oates, I appreciate your time. We have had a long conversation about the future of the Liberal Party. I appreciate you. You're going to be a sort of guest columnist and hopefully future podcast guest. I hope this podcast has not been sufficiently bad to stop you from coming on in 2025. Look, you're going to write some columns for me in the future. Crypto.com. What's your Twitter?
Boats02. It's easy to remember. I am Boats. That's the nickname. If you knew me in high school, you can confirm it. BOATES 02.
Okay. Well, follow him on Twitter follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Read my political writing at scrimshawscripts.substack.com. I will have an announcement in the new year about some sports writing because I have not given up on giving a shit about that. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Read my book, Salvation of the Storm. I don't know if I have anything else. I used to have a really great podcast outro, and then I got fired by the line, so I don't really know what to do anymore. Thanks for coming on, buddy. You willing to come back in January to figure out where the fuck the Liberal Party is once we know what's going to happen with Trudeau?
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on, buddy.
You had a spicy intro, so I'm going to have a spicy outro. Let me just say there's a special place in hell for the Bloc Québécois and for Yves-François Blanchet, and I view it as my personal duty as a Newfoundlander to make sure that they do not take power or not the special opposition.
There is a look. My grandfather worked at the Sun Life building in Montreal. I have a special relationship to the city of Montreal and to specifically Dorchester Square. My father, every time I went to Montreal, would make a specific effort to be like the street currently known as Rene Levesque is not actually Rene Levesque, it is still Dorchester. Like, I am with you on all of that. And honestly, one of the most, like, from a pure content standpoint, me fighting for Canadian, like, if the PQ are actually going to win the next election in Quebec, there's nothing I would enjoy more than making the case for Quebec in the Federation, because I love Montreal and I love Quebec and I really want them to stick. Anyways,
and look, this is not a slight against the Quebecois people. They're some of the warmest, funniest, friendliest people that I know. They love a good cigarette, and that's all, right? Just but the Bloc Québécois.
I can only smoke in Montreal because there's something about being in Montreal that makes me.
Montreal is the only place in North America where people smoke and walk.
Dude, there's something. Every time I'm in Dorchester Square and there's a statue and I'm staring at the Sun Life building, I want to smoke a cigar. I don't know what it is. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been fucking incredible. You're fucking amazing. I love you, Ben. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Evan. Love you too. All right. Take care, buddy.